So when you look at the Brewers, I think this is one of those teams where some teams are difficult to break down, and maybe there's some nuance there. The Brewers are not one of those teams. It's very simple. Same stories last year. Yeah, they made some additions, right? They get William Contreras from the Braves, Wade Miley, Jesse Winker from the Mariners, but nothing too significant here. So it's the same old story for the Brewers. They've got the pitching, but Kate, they got to hit the baseball. They got to generate runs.
Yeah, they were not raking in the runs last season. And in this type of division, when you have the Cardinals ahead of you as the favorites to win, they got better this offseason. The Brewers didn't necessarily get any better. You're going to stick exactly where you are, especially when you have a couple players that you let go. Traded off Hunter Renfroe, Colton Wong. Those are two players in your lineup or rotations that have pretty good batting averages for you last season. So if you're a team that needs to be generating runs and putting some runs on the board, I mean, I'm not sure that that's the right move for you to trade away some players that did okay for you last season, especially when you went through a drought like they did to end the season, just losing games upon games. It just seems like some bigger change needed to be made if they want to really contend this season.
Yeah, I agree. And I mentioned this in the first time we previewed the Brewers, is that they have an interesting situation with their ace, Corbin Burns. Again, 5-1 to win the Cy Young, and I don't mind the value there because he's one of the best in the game. Won the Cy Young in 2021, led the National League in strikeouts last season. But during the offseason, he went into arbitration with the Brewers, and he wanted $10.75 million. They gave him $10 million. And before you say, oh, dude, who cares, bro? I mean, you're still getting $10 million. Dude, I'm not telling anyone what to do with their money. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't mess with anyone's money. And also, when you're one of the best in the game, and no one doubts that Corbin Burns is one of the best in the game, if you're the Brewers, why won't you just give him the extra $750,000? I mean, he's earned it. Baseball hands out money hand over fist. There are players getting paid that certainly don't produce the way Corbin Burns does. And the reason why I mention this is not because I particularly care about the money, but Corbin Burns cares about the money. And he's already admitted this is going to be a problem. This is already sort of turned into a bit of an acrimonious relationship with the Brewers. So moving ahead, if this is a guy you want to keep, and he's going to be a free agent, I believe, after the 2024 season, this could be a problem. Maybe time can heal things, and maybe they make up here and they play nice over time. But right now, he's not pleased with the team for which he plays, and I'm sure he's still going to perform, but certainly this is not the relationship you want to have with your ace pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, Jenks. The money in baseball is insane. They're throwing around money left and right. Some of these contracts we've seen over the past couple of years are just massive. So we're talking a very small amount of money in the grand scheme of baseball. Now, $750,000 is a pretty large sum of money for most people, but for Major League Baseball players or for Major League franchises, not that much. Doesn't seem like a heavy price just to keep your star pitcher happy. You've got a Cy Young contender on your pitching staff. Give him the extra money. Keep him happy. Keep him wanting to play in Milwaukee longer because he's a free agent next year. He's probably going to want to walk if you guys can't come to an agreement that on it makes him happy, because it's all about pleasing the players at the end of the day, really. And what's $750,000 to you anyway right now?
Right. Like, exactly.
What
Especially when it's like a relationship, if you're trying to cultivate a relationship over time, and I'm not saying spend money, but ultimately then you make sacrifices along the way and say, hey, I want to solidify this. I want this to last. This is one of the best guys in the game. I want him to stay here. And so, yes, it's $750,000, but when we're talking baseball and the exorbitant money that is thrown out, this is nothing, especially if you want to keep a guy happy long-term. I don't know what the Brewers are thinking here, but when you look at their rotation, I mean, it's top to bottom, about as good as it gets. Brandon Woodruff, one of the top strikeout leaders in the National League, went 13-4 last year, an ERA of 3.05. We mentioned Burns. Freddie Peralta was an all-star in 2021. He averages more than a strikeout per inning. You've got Wade Miley, Eric Lauer holding down the bottom of the rotation. They're waiting for Aaron Ashby to sort of come in and ease his way in. He's going to miss a couple of months at the start of the year. So the rotation is great. The problem is, can these guys generate enough runs? They hit a lot of home runs. They finished third in the majors in home runs last season, and yet in the National League, they were just sixth in runs scored. So they got to get guys on base and then hit those homers, because just hitting these solo home runs is not going to get it done.
No, I mean, how are you supposed to win baseball games if you're hitting one solo home run a game? Like, not going to get it done. And that seems to be the story for the Brewers. Like, sure, they can hit a lot of home runs, but if you're not getting players on base, if you're not bringing in runs consistently, you're not going to win ball games. And they've got a really good young 23-year-old. Garrett Mitchell had a brief stint with the club last season. He's pretty good, and Jenks, someone who might be able to help them in that hitting and RBI category.
Yeah, I think so too. And when you look at him as a player, I mean, at the end of last season, he was unbelievable. He came on like a force. And there's always, I totally understand, when you're talking about a young guy, there will be some sort of regression because it's hard to come in the game and immediately tear things up. But Garrett Mitchell came in and in 28 games hit .311 to go with 8 steals. Now, he's not a power hitter, but he is a guy who has a lot of speed. And we've talked about the new rules in baseball this season where the bases are going to be bigger. If you're talking about a team that needs to generate some runs, Garrett Mitchell is not going to hit for power, but he is a guy. I believe he went to school UCLA. He's a guy who can come in, get on base, and then maybe use those power hitters to bring him home. But you can be aggressive with a guy like that. And as far as betting is concerned, like, I'm not someone who bets a lot of stolen base props, and certainly Vegas knows the rules like we do. But I do think with those bigger bases, certainly that gives the edge to these guys who are speedsters on the base pass. So just maybe, do you think there's any sort of advantage there? Can you find – that's a market, I have to admit, I don't really look at, the stolen base market in Major League Baseball. But maybe it's something that you look at because maybe it'll take a while for the market to catch up.
Yeah, I'm not a stolen base kind of better either,
Yeah.
Jenks, but it will be a little adjustment period. So maybe you can capitalize on that early on in the season before the books adjust and kind of figure out like how much it really is going to affect the game and those stolen base numbers. I think it's also probably a positive for a team like Milwaukee, who isn't a team that necessarily hits for power. If they can get guys on base, obviously these bigger bases make it easier for them to steal the bases, which moves people around the bases, for lack of a better term, a little bit better when you're not, hitting the ball out of the park night in and night out in, like, a big time manner.
Sure.
Single home runs, whatever, but they need more than that.
Yeah, they definitely do. I did read a story about Mitchell that I thought was interesting, and it's that when he was younger, his mom took him on a tour of a couple of different ballparks, and one of the ballparks he visited was Comerica Field, where the Tigers play, and that's when Max Scherzer was pitching. And he said he watched Max Scherzer and was just in awe. He was 12 or 13 years old. And then last year, he gets the call up to the big leagues, and he faced Max Scherzer, and I believe it was the game in which Max was coming off the disabled list and threw like 5 or 6 perfect innings, and Mitchell struck out twice. And he said, I was just trying to wrap my head around the fact that I watched this guy as a kid, and here I am facing him in the major leagues. Makes me feel old, but also is a really cool story.